Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the SELEP Accountability Board. I am not Sarah Dance, as you probably gather, so but I'll firstly just welcome those board members who are with us. I think we are expecting potentially one of our non-voting members to join us remotely as well. But welcome to all those who are with us. So can I firstly start by passing over to Suzanne, I think, to set out a number of things, including why it's me.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. So yes, Sarah Dance is normally the chair of Accountability Board. Unfortunately, Sarah has had a family emergency that happened yesterday at the last minute, so is unable to chair today. The normal standard procedure for this committee would be for one of the non-voting members, our reps from higher education or further education, to step up and act as chair, but given the very short notice, Simon Cook's already given his apologies, and we know that Rosemary can actually only join us for part of the meeting today. That wasn't a possibility, and we do actually need the chair to be here in person as well. The chair can't be remote, I'm afraid. So very kindly, Councillor Goff has stepped up and acted to act as chair, which we've confirmed with monitoring officer at Essex that's okay. So Councillor Goff will be here in a twin-hatted role today, representing Kent as leader, but also acting as chair. So yeah, please do bear with us.
Thank you. Yes, and it will. I'll endeavour to make it pretty clear as to when I'm wearing one hat and when not the other. Hopefully, it won't be too confusing. Perhaps could I just ask board members to introduce themselves and also those officers who are at the table. So, and indeed, we've got Stephanie as well, Steph as well, who is a Section 151 representative who's with us remotely. So we'll go around the table first. Just to start, I'm Roger Goff, leader of Kent County Council, and also chairing this meeting for the reasons we've just discussed. So should we just go around from this side?
Suzanne Bennett, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for SELEP.
Charlotte Moody, solicitor for the accountable body.
Councillor Keith Glazier, leader of East Sussex County Council.
Ron Woodley, Deputy Leader, Southend-on-Sea Council.
Louise McKinley, Deputy Leader, Essex County Council.
Mark Cockshaw, Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Thurrock Council.
Helen Dyer, Capital Programme Manager at SELEP.
Thank you. And could I just ask a couple of other members who are on the remote connection to introduce themselves? Rosemary first, welcome to you.
Thank you. Apologies, I can't be there. Rosemary Nunn, University of Greenwich, representing higher education.
Thank you very much. And Steph.
Thank you. Stephanie Mitchener, representing the Section 151 officer of the accountable body.
Thank you very much. Right. Welcome all. Now, we are on a very tight schedule this morning. Sorry? I believe this is, I understand this is, others are welcome to introduce if need be, but I think we would.
Probably won't be able to hear them. The people on the same won't be able to catch because they haven't got a mic. So.
All right, is that okay? Yeah. Fine. But welcome to all who are taking part, whether physically or remotely. We are on a bit of a tight schedule because one or two of our members attending today have to leave at various stages, which I'm aware of. We are at this moment quorate, so we can make decisions. We can carry on as long as we like, but we can only make decisions clearly when we're quorate, which is 6 members, of whom at least 4 being elected councillors. So we will endeavour to stick as tightly to the schedule as we possibly can and go from there. Just a few other points. Could board members please remember to turn their microphones on before speaking and off afterwards? That helps clearly with everyone being able to hear the discussion. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Similarly, in terms of voting, again, please raise your hand. Members of the public can join the meeting, and as we mentioned, officers are listening into the discussion, both those who are with us in person and those who are with us remotely. A recording of the meeting will be available via the SELEP website after this meeting has concluded. For those attending the meeting virtually, please do not use the chat function on Zoom. And equally, for those who are attending virtually, if there are any technical issues, please remain on the call. We'll resolve the matter as quickly as we can. We have no items requiring confidential discussion, though on one item there is an appendix which is confidential, and we'll talk about how to deal with that when we get to that item. Helen, could you mention about any apologies?
Yes, so we've received apologies from Sarah Dance, as mentioned, Councillor Bentley, who is represented by Councillor McKinley, and Simon Cook. And as mentioned, Rosemary is only able to join us for the first hour.
Okay, good. Okay, fine. Then I think we can move on. So minutes of the last meeting, can we confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting, which was on the 2nd of July?
Yeah. Can I just put in, we've had a message from Sarah Dance. The minutes from the last meeting state that Sarah Dance draws a small salary from Canterbury City Council for some work that she's doing for them. That is not accurate. She's not an employee. She has a contract for provision of services to Canterbury Council. So can we please correct that in the notes before they're signed off?
Yeah, fine. Otherwise, can so I think we can move on from that.
Yep, no, confirm we received no public questions.
Yes, thank you. So this report provides the usual update on the LGF programme and confirms the outturn position for 2020-21 alongside spend forecasts for future years. The board are reminded that whilst the LGF programme officially ended on the 31st of March, there is no provision within the grant agreement with government that allows for the unspent funding to be clawed back by government as long as the funding is spent on capital expenditure. The report formalises the update on the M2 Junction 5 improvements project, which was provided verbally at the July board meeting. Secretary of State for Transport approval for the proposed improvements was received in June, and the project can now progress to delivery with a more detailed update on the project to be provided to the board in February 2022. The board are asked to consider whether 3 projects should be allowed to continue LGF spend beyond September 2021. 2 of the projects, Sturry Town Centre Journey Time and Accessibility Enhancements and Innovation Park Medway Northern Site Extension, meet all the conditions for spend beyond September. Whilst the report indicates that the Bexhill Enterprise Park North project also meets the conditions for LGF spend beyond September, a further update has subsequently been provided by East Sussex County Council, which indicates it will no longer be possible for all the conditions to be met. As set out in the report, the third-party grant agreement between East Sussex County Council and Sea Change Sussex is not yet in place. At the time of drafting the report, it was expected that a decision would be taken by East Sussex County Council this week as to whether to enter into a variation of the usual third-party grant agreement. This decision has subsequently been delayed until the 30th of September. As a result, contractual commitments with the construction contractor will not be in place by the 30th of September as required, as this contract will not be completed until after the signing of the third-party grant agreement. Therefore, the recommendation to the board with regard to LGF spend beyond September on the Bexhill Enterprise Park North project has changed. It is now recommended that the board agree that the project does not meet the conditions for LGF spend beyond September and that the project is removed from the LGF programme. The 1.94 million LGF currently held by East Sussex County Council should be returned to Essex County Council as the accountable body for SELEP within 4 weeks of this board meeting. This recommendation is made as it's considered that there are no clear grounds for the project to be treated as an exception to the conditions previously agreed by the board. The funding will be reallocated under agenda item 12, and it is recommended that it be awarded to the Kent and Medway Edge Hub, Mercury Rising and Southend Airport Business Park projects, subject to the return of the funding by East Sussex County Council. If the board considers that the project should be treated as an exception to the conditions for LGF spend beyond September, then clear grounds for this will need to be identified. Due consideration will also need to be given to the wider implications for the timely delivery of the LGF programme as a whole when determining any grounds for allowing LGF spend beyond September on this project. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Helen. Clearly you'll have something to say. I'm sure Keith will have something to say. I've got my microphone on. So we'll come to Bexhill in 1 second, but clearly on the other items, there's a recommendation that these are progressed and they seem in many ways to be pretty straightforward. Does anybody wish to say anything in relation to any of those other projects before we move on to discuss Bexhill North Enterprise Park? Nope. Oh, sorry, Rodney.
Medway, I think where it refers to already received permission to go past September 2022, I think that is an error. That should be 2021.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
So could that be
that can be noted?
Yes.
Noted and amended.
Corrected. Good. Okay. That apart, I think we can come back to a formal vote in a moment, but we are, I don't think there's any other key points anyone wants to raise on those items. So let us come to Bexhill Enterprise Park North. Keith, I think you were indicating.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, it's a disappointment to all of us that we're not able to meet all of the conditions that were laid out at the last meeting, and it is simply now a technicality that this will need to go to an individual decision making, and the earliest we could get that in was the 30th of September, and so therefore it falls outside of the current regulations. So I would ask my colleagues to consider that the delay and the exception is granted. And the reason I do that is that this is a shovel-ready project. It's been held up for almost years, many months, on a planning application that was refused by the local authority, then won at appeal. And so we had all of that time, if you like, held in abeyance. Since that time, we've worked to get this in place, and it is a matter of simply getting this agreement in place now. And I have every confidence that the delivery of the project would happen within the timescale set, and it will be ready to go. So, I mean, I'll take any questions if there are any from colleagues, but I come back to the point that having waited for such a long time to get to where we thought we'd now get on, to come back today and I have to report that we're not quite there is a disappointment to all of us. And apologies to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Keith. Rodney.
Just one point. I fully support what Keith said. I just want to ask him, bearing in mind the number of challenges that have been on this project, and those who were challenging it, is there any likely challenge, I say, through a judicial review of the decision of the appeal decision?
Absolutely none. As far as I'm aware, the appeal was very clear and awarded costs against the council, and there's no chance, in my opinion.
Awarded costs, then I very much doubt it.
Yeah. So I don't think that is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, just a bit of a clarification. So it's the decision, final decision, being delayed till the 30th of September, and is that because of just programming issues of just trying to get everyone there, and it's not actually a reason of just trying to kick this past this, or someone else in that committee is trying to kick that? It's just programming to get a available date.
I mean, I don't want to prejudice the decision that actually it'll be my individual decision that needs to be made at the end of September. So I don't want to prejudice that in any way. But as I've been made aware by officers, that there is likely to be a positive report put before me with all of the answers to the questions that are still outstanding. So it is about the conditions on the grant agreement, nothing more, just simply that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments to Keith on this? I think, Ron.
Yeah, just to say I support Keith on this. I just want clarification that the LEP or us haven't had a problem with government trying to take any money back or our position in terms of that situation. But you know, we know Keith will get this done and move on it, so we should support him on it.
Thank you. Can I suggest, I mean, I'm hearing generally, I think, a pretty sympathetic hearing for the case being made by Keith from for East Sussex. Can I just ask officers, if then we are minded, and Keith, you may feed in on this a bit as well, if we are minded to not go with the recommendation, but to say that this project still is able to be taken forward subject to that approval on the 30th of September, how does that work in terms of timing? And I think the suggestion is we need to be clear on the grounds for our making an exception. Now, I think the grounds in terms of the general debate have been that this is a project that is actually, as Keith said, shovel ready, that this remains an unfortunate but not of huge systemic significance delay, and that we believe it can then go forward. But I don't know whether we need, from a governance point of view, more than that, and equally to be able to answer Ron's question as well. Sorry, Mark, did you want, before I turn to Suzanne, Mark, did you want to?
Yeah, on that point, it's interesting. Obviously, we've got strategic board after that date. So would there be better to make sure that the strategic board doesn't change our decision if there is a lapse of that and it doesn't go the right way on the 30th? There's an opportunity at strategic board to make sure the other three are wholeheartedly, but subject to this the 30th of September would be, and strategic board can then look at this and look at our decision, because our decision was based on what we've known here, not what's then they know then. And we're sitting with two hats on, the strategic board, but strategic board got an opportunity at that point to reverse our decision, and I think we should be making you aware of that as it goes to that board.
Thank you. I think it's a very, very important point, actually. Suzanne.
Okay, so the grant agreement, there's nothing here that the grant could not, government could not reclaw the money. The grant agreement only sets out that the money must be spent on capital, which it would be spent on capital. The criteria that were set by this board and then endorsed by strategic board. We'll come to Charlotte in a minute just to confirm on the legal side, but as far as I've been advised that this board is able to make a decision, make an exception, as long as they believe that there is compelling grounds and can demonstrate compelling grounds that that there is. Strategic board cannot overturn the decision of accountability board. Two separate boards. We are taking an update to strategic board on high risk projects in October, but there wouldn't be a decision there that they could then overturn or would be changed. So it sits within this board's gift to make this decision and grant this exemption. If I come over to Charlotte, can just give us the legal point of view on the making a decision outside of the criteria.
Many thanks. Charlotte, please.
So as Suzanne has outlined, this board can stray from the conditions that it set out or stray from policy, but provided that it believes there is a good reason to do so. It's really important in your decision making that you make clear what the exception is and why you're going to treat this project differently or outside of the conditions that were set.
Thank you. Keith.
Can I just make very clear what I'm asking? So what we'd agreed was that everything needed to be in place by this contractual, and everything needed to be in place by the end of September. What I'm actually saying is the decision to put those bits in place were made on the 30th of September. So what I'm really asking for is that the board allow a period of 1 month to the end of October, or up to the next SELEP accountability board meeting on the 19th, whichever you want to do, to ensure the contractual contract is in place. So the decision will be made on the 30th. Then it's entirely up to the lawyers to just dot the I's, cross the T's, or say we can't do it, whichever way around it is.
Okay, and do we have enough, for the purposes of the minutes or whatever, enough in terms of the, going back to your point, Louise, the overall rationale for this being that it's, as we said, a shovel-ready project, that it's that it actually meets many of the criteria that we would set normally for a project of this kind, and we have a clear timeline in terms of how decisions will be taken. I think that would be roughly the rationale we'd be looking at. But Suzanne or Louise, if you could advise.
It's a decision of board that the rationale is compelling enough. It's not a decision for members. I think we've stated that now. What we need to do is come up with some new words for another recommendation if board wanted to consider another recommendation for that, which I think Helen may have one that she's got, who's been working on there.
Here's one I prepared earlier. Well, can I suggest then that we go through, presumably in terms of all the recommendations that there are on this, we presumably need to approve each of them individually, don't we? So shall I just run through all the others and ask for approval of those, and then we go to our final judgment on Bexhill Enterprise Park North. Okay. So the recommendations before the board: note the total spend on project delivery. I won't read it all out unless I have to, but well, do I? Yeah, it looks like I do. Okay. Sorry. Right. Okay. Very exciting. Notes the total spend on project delivery in 2020-21 of £49.314 million LGF, excluding Department for Transport, DFT, retained schemes, and 72.564 million, including DFT retained schemes, as set out in Table 1. So noted, I trust. Agree the updated total planned LGF spend on project delivery in 2021-22 of 55.616 million, excluding DFT retained schemes, and increasing to 72.392 million, including DFT retained schemes, as set out in Table 2 and Appendix A. Is that, no, do we need to have a hand vote?
Can we see hands for this?
Can we see hands for this, please? Is that agreed? Thank you. And I think Rosemary, I think you...
Rosemary's non-voting.
Rosemary's non-voting. Apologies. Keep learning this gradually. Right. Okay. Good. Then next bit is note the delivery and risk assessment as set out in Appendix D. Noted. Note that the M2 Junction 5 improvements project has now received approval from the Secretary of State for Transport, which satisfies the conditions attached to the transfer of the LGF funding. Noted again. Agree the spend of LGF beyond 30th of September 2021 and the revised completion date for the Strood Town Centre journey time and accessibility enhancements projects as set out in Section 7 of this report, subject to Strategic Board endorsement in October 2021. Is that agreed? Again, we have to raise our hands. Okay. Thank you, that's agreed. Agree the spend of, sorry, I'm just making sure I've lost, yeah, agree the spend of LGF beyond 30th of September 2021 and the revised completion date for the Innovation Park Medway, Northern Side Extension, Rochester Airport Phase 3 project as set out in Section 7 of this report, subject again to Strategic Board endorsement in October 2021. Is that agreed? Show of hands, please. Agreed. Good. Then I think we move on to Bexhill Enterprise Park North. And Helen, I think you've got some magic words for us.
Yes, so I have two proposed recommendations for Bexhill Enterprise Park North. The first one is to agree the spend of LGF beyond the 30th September 2021 as an exception and the revised completion date for the Bexhill Enterprise Park North project as set out in Section 7 of the report, subject to Strategic Board endorsement in October 2021, receipt of confirmation that contractual commitments with the construction contractor are in place by the 31st of October 2021, and compliance with any conditions attached to the completion of the third-party grant agreement.
Okay, so I'll ask if that is agreed. Again, we definitely need hands on this. Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much, Helen.
And the second recommendation, agree that the third-party grant agreement between East Sussex County Council and Sea Change Sussex in relation to the Bexhill Enterprise Park North project must be in place by the 19th of November 2021. If the grant agreement is not completed by this date, the project will be removed from the LGF programme and the 1.94 million LGF funding will be released for reallocation to alternative projects on the LGF prioritised project pipeline during the meeting on the 19th of November.
That's agreed.
Can I ask why the 19th of November and previously changed from the October? And why?
Because the board meeting is on the 19th of November, so we've just tied it up for the board meeting.
So right to the last. You've removed it to the right and last to the last minute of the board meeting.
Yes.
So we might not know before the board meeting's papers.
Yes, but the additional funding awards report will come to the board anyway, so we'll be able to make that decision.
Good. Is that agreed as well? Excellent. Thank you all. Agreed. Right, I think we've covered off this item, haven't we? Right, thank you all for that. Let's move on to item 6, the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package Project Update. And Howard, I think it's over, Howard Davis, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the purpose of this report is for the Accountability Board to receive an update on the delivery of the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package Project and on progress made towards meeting the conditions which were attached to the transfer to Kent County Council of the remaining unspent LGF funding allocated to the project at the end of 2020-21. It is noted in the report that permission has been secured to demolish the Wheatsheaf Public House, which is required to enable delivery of improvements to the loose road corridor. However, permission has not yet been secured to relocate the ragstone wall associated with Moat Park, which is required to deliver the Ashford Road junction with Willington Street improvements. It is expected that the application to relocate the ragstone wall will be submitted next week, with determination expected in early November. If the application needs to be considered by the Planning Committee, this will happen on the 18th of November. Pre-application advice has been sought from Maidstone Borough Council and no significant risks to the application have been identified. The delay in securing the planning consent has not impacted on the delivery programme of the Ashford Road Willington Street improvements. It is therefore recommended that the project is allowed until the next board meeting to secure the outstanding planning permission. Each phase of the project is at a different stage of development, with successful delivery of the project as a whole dependent upon the completion of detailed design and successful procurement of construction contractors. An indicative programme for delivery of all phases of the project is set out within the report. Lost my place. It is noted that in this programme is dependent upon being able to book the required road space on both the Kent County Council and Highways England networks and managing any potential clashes with other roadworks within Maidstone, so as to avoid detrimentally impacting the traffic flow on the road network. It is recommended that a further update is provided to the board in November to include an update on the remaining planning application, progress towards delivery and provision of an updated delivery programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Howard. Clearly, if I'm at this point, I think wearing my Kent County Council rather than my chair's hat, there is actually some updated information that Kent County Council's received since that. So it certainly agrees that, as you say, everything appears on the project to be on track, and indeed that there is expectation of agreement in relation to the ragstone wall. However, the mechanism is slightly different. So we've actually had different advice now from Maidstone Borough Council, which is in essence that what's involved is widening the existing highway. So that is actually treated as permitted development. However, so what's required is not planning consent, but rather listed building consent for the relocation of the wall. Now, there's an 8-week statutory period for consulting on that. There've been one or two comments. There was a pre-app meeting earlier this week on the 8th, so that's a couple of days ago. There's a slight tweaking to the design that's required before the consent and heritage statement can be submitted. This will be completed in the next couple of weeks, literally, I mean, next 2 weeks. So it can be submitted before the beginning of October. The expectation is it would therefore be in place but just before December. So what we would like to suggest is that the recommendation on that, everything other elements of the recommendation is fine, but can we record on the item related to at the moment saying about planning consent on this to read as follows instead. Agree that a project update should be presented to the board in February 2022 on progress to secure the necessary consents for the relocation of the ragstone wall. Because that is, as I say, the slightly different bit of process to that which we'd previously been advised was necessary. I am assured that it is a procedural rather than a substantive effect. Subject to that, I think everything else that certainly from that point of view, from a Kent County Council point of view, I think everything else we have in the paper and recommendations is sort of good to go. But does anyone else have any comments or questions on this one? Okay, can I turn to officers? Are there any sort of feedback on the point I've just raised?
Helen, do you want to?
Helen, did you want?
Okay, I think if the board are comfortable with that, that shouldn't present an issue. I would still recommend that we have an update in November, so we can get an update on the other phases of the project as well.
I can see no reason for a problem with that. Absolutely. So if we record that there is an update on the general progress of the project in November, including probably where exactly we are on that element to do with the ragstone wall, then there would be a more formal update in the February confirming that that's taken place. Is that agreeable? Mark?
Yeah, I think we do need to have a comment of the whole project. I think we're right in November. Because I know your comment there was of the planning consent. This is easier than permitted development, or not permitted development. Development of a listed building sometimes can be much harder than a planning consent. I know that from the state cinema, and that's been had planning consent, but when we couldn't get consent from Heritage England now, and we only received that 3.5 years later. So it does need to be updated in the whole on November, I think, and keep us privileged.
That's absolutely fine. So if we can record, so can I then suggest that we amend that relevant item, agree that project updates, how about that we agree that a project update should be presented to the board in November 2021, and again in February 2022, comma, the latter on progress to secure the necessary consents. Does that sound?
We could just keep the last recommendation as it is now, which requires an update to come to the November board, which provides an update on progress towards achieving the planning consent on delivery of the project, and just change the one above it, which refers to securing the planning update in November on securing the planning consent, to refer to February.
That would be fine. I suspect on the last one, it's the words planning consent, which is, I suspect, a question mark.
I think it's just progress towards achieving it is how it's written in the last recommendation. So I think in November,
does planning consent on that mean
okay,
planning permission? I'm just thinking about the fact it's a listed building.
We could change it to listed building.
Yeah, if we change it to that, I suggest, then with that, I'd be very happy.
Just consents, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But I think we can be wholly clear that we're talking about subject to that. So can I, shall I read out again the unless anyone has anything else to say on this particular item? No, relieved to see that's the case. Right, so I'll read out. So the board is asked to note the update on project delivery and progress towards achieving the outstanding consents, I think we would say, wouldn't we? Noted, I hope. Agree that the £8.9 million LGF funding should remain allocated to the project. Is that agreed? With a show of hands, please. Good, good. That's agreed. Agree to allow, I think I probably need some of your words here, Helen, on the third bit, because this is about a general update, isn't it, in November? Because we're not saying that we can do the planning consent by, or indeed the listed building consent by the meeting in November. So the third, did you have some wording for that third?
I'd say we stick with the fourth recommendation for the November board, which requires a further update on the project, which outlines progress towards achieving the outstanding consents.
Or consents, yes.
And on delivery of the project to be presented to the November board.
Yes, we do it, I think, which we're happy if we delete planning. Okay, fine. Are we agreed on that? Agreed. I think, yeah, we need hands up, please, if that's, yeah. Good. Okay, thank you. And then would we, want some additional wording of the kind that I suggested in terms of agree that a project update should be presented to the board in February 2022 on progress to secure the necessary consents for the relocation of the ragstone wall. Okay, is that agreed? Again, thank you.
Can I just check that we're striking 2.1.3 then? That recommendation is removed, yeah?
If I could find 2.1.3, I'm sure that's right.
Yes, so the third recommendation is replaced with the new one.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, just to be clear for the minutes, that the one that's currently at 2.1.3 has been removed. And now we have a new recommendation. So if you could you just read that out again? Did you get that?
So I think the new recommendation was agree that a project update should be presented to the board in February 2022 on progress towards securing the required consents to relocate the Ragstone Wall.
Yeah. Show of hands, please. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Right. Richard, I think you're with us remotely.
Yes,
welcome,
hello.
and if you could initiate this, thank you very much.
Hi, Councillor Groff. Sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying in the last.
No, apologies.
Last
I had a moment when I forgot my own instructions and didn't have the microphone on. So yeah, it's just to say if you could initiate this on this item 7, and then we'll hand over to Helen. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Hello, everybody from the board. I've been asked to provide the latest position on the delivery of the project, any known risks and the steps which need to be taken to secure completion. The full report provides an update on the delivery of the signalised connection and priority lanes to make the road link to the A21, referred to in the previous board reports as the temporary connection. This will allow the full use of the road between Queensway and the A21 in the manner intended in the original business case. The report also provides an update on the proposed final connection with the A21, referred to in previous board reports as the permanent connection. Progress, perceived risks and next steps on both now. So on the signalised connection and priority lanes, since the last report to the board, there's been significant progress made in the redesign of the junction to provide this connection, which involves also the introduction of traffic lights at the junction between A21 and Junction Road, along with priority lanes as well, which meets the requirements of the two highways authorities, County Council and Highways England. The key actions taken and next steps include the transport modelling has received in principle approval from Highways England and East Sussex County Council. Initial designs were submitted by Sea Change Sussex to Highways England. The road safety audit as RSA Stage 1 has informed the design process with the designer's response to the audit being submitted to Highways England for sign-off, and the indications are that this should be received imminently. After this, a full package of plans and designs will be submitted for Highways England and East Sussex County Council approval, which we still see is achievable by mid-September. And then once approved, Section 278's agreements will be processed. The traffic regulation order, which is necessary for the closure of Junction Road, required to enable the signalised junction to operate safely and efficiently as originally intended, has been advertised in early August. And I can confirm to the board that since the closing date at the end of August, that 1 objection and 2 requests for additional information were received, with the expectation that the matters raised are resolvable through discussions with the objector, which all leads to a report being taken to the County Council's Planning Committee, which I can now confirm has been scheduled for the 13th of October. As a result, the construction of the signalised connection can carry on in parallel whilst any objections to the TRO are being considered. However, it would not be possible for the new road to be used as a through route and open to traffic between Queensway and the A21 until such time as the TRO has been made and sealed and Junction Road has been physically closed. I'd also just want to update and reassure the board that in terms of booking the space to work on the network, both Highways England and East Sussex County Council are aware of the scheduled time and haven't indicated any problems at this stage. As such, the expected programme for delivery of the signalised connection is around 6 to 8 weeks, and it is currently anticipated that that connection will have commenced on site prior to the next board meeting and be constructed and completed by late November, early December, with the full route open to traffic at this point, again, subject to the TRO. The delivery of this connection will maximise the employment benefits of the scheme already realised through 90% of the new road, which is already complete, and will resolve existing traffic congestion, particularly along the ridge. Turning to the final connection, the report covers the current proposed final connection, with the majority of the carriageway having been delivered. And at this stage, land acquisition negotiations have not been concluded, which means it's not possible to provide a definitive timeline for completion of the final connection. In terms of the project budget, I can confirm all the £10 million of the LGF has been spent, with Sea Change Sussex having retained themselves funding up to £2 million to complete the project. In summary, the above update should provide confidence to the board that the necessary steps and actions have been taken by Sea Change Sussex, East Sussex County Council and third parties to address a connection to the A21 and enable the benefits outlined in the business case to be realised. Thank you, Councillor Goff.
Thank you very much, Richard. Helen, I think you're going to add on this.
Yes, I just wanted to come in very quickly. So as the board are aware, delivery of this project has been significantly delayed compared to the programme set out within the business case. The delay in delivering the final section of the road presents a risk to the realisation of the employment and traffic related benefits set out within the business case. The connection with the A21 is critical to ensuring that the levels of congestion are reduced and to facilitate the unlocking of the employment sites. The business case indicated that initial job creation as a result of the project would come forward in 2018-19. However, due to project delivery delays, the benefits will now not be realised in accordance with the profile set out in the business case. It is recommended that an update on both the anticipated employment benefits and the timeline for the realisation of these benefits is provided within the next update report to the board. It should also be noted that if delivery of the final section of the road cannot be completed, then steps may need to be taken to recover the £10 million from East Sussex County Council.
Thank you both very much. Does anyone wish to comment? Keith?
Well, again, the time that this has taken is just beyond belief, really. It's been a problem for me personally as a local member and as leader of the council. I'm confident now that we have a solution. Highways England are happy with the traffic light scheme, and providing that is allowed and is successful as we expect, then the acquisition of the land and whatever can be resolved alongside of that, in as much as the road itself will be open and all of the outputs that we've claimed, although being late, will be deliverable. And I can't stress enough, anybody who's been down there and seen 90 something % of the road is already in, roundabouts join the Queensway off into the land that we want to get developed. So again, a really vital, important improvement to the area, and hopefully will relieve the traffic congestion on the ridge.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments on this? If not, then I suggest we move to the recommendations. So the board is asked to note the latest position on the delivery of the project and the steps which need to be taken to secure completion. Okay, so that's noted. Then to agree that an update will be provided to Strategic Board in October 2021 to make them aware of the issues related to the progress of the project. Is that agreed? Okay. And agree that the board will be provided with a further update on the project, which updates the project delivery plan and associated milestones at our meeting on the 19th of November 2021. Is that agreed? Can I see hands again? Lovely, thank you. Good, then I think we can move on. Thank you very much. And Richard, thank you. Right, we move on to item 8, London Gateway, Stanford, La Hope, LGF update report. Howard, I think we're over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the purpose of this report is to provide a further update on the delivery of the London Gateway, Stanford, La Hope project, which has been identified as high risk. The project aims to provide the infrastructure required to improve access to employment opportunities through sustainable modes of travel, through the provision of a new station building and a mobility hub, which allows integration between a variety of sustainable travel modes. Since the last board meeting, the planning application for the new station building has been approved. It is expected that procurement to appoint a construction contractor for these works will commence this month, with a contractor appointed in February of 2022. Construction of the new station building is expected to take place between March 2022 and October 2023. The greatest risk currently sits with the delivery of the mobility hub. Development of the proposals for this phase of the project are at an early stage of development, with an update on concept designs expected to be provided at the November board meeting. Due to the early stage of development, there are a number of risks and uncertainties attached to this phase of the project, including planning consent has not yet been granted, the exact scope of works is currently unknown, and therefore construction costs and the availability of a full funding package to support the delivery of the works cannot be confirmed, and to date it is unclear whether the proposals for the hub will facilitate realisation of the benefits set out within the original business case. Despite the early stage of development, it's expected that the mobility hub will be delivered during the second half of the construction programme for the new station building. At the time of the business case approval, it was expected that the project would be delivered by December 2018. The project has been delayed due to a number of factors, as set out in the report. Therefore, in accordance with the requirements of the assurance framework, the board are asked to approve the delay to the project completion. It should be noted that the benefits outlined within the business case are solely dependent upon delivery of the mobility hub, and therefore the project will continue to be flagged as high risk until there is greater certainty regarding the scope, affordability, and deliverability of this phase of the project. It is noted within the report that project costs have increased significantly compared to the original business case. As a result, this will need to be considered by the board as a project change, and an updated value for money assessment for the project will be required to demonstrate the project still offers high value for money. Given the current uncertainty regarding the scope and benefits that will be realised as a result of the delivery of the mobility hub, it is recommended that consideration of the project change is delayed until there is greater design and cost certainty. This will also provide greater confidence regarding the expected project benefits. As set out in the report, it is recommended that further updates are brought to the board in November and February to update on development of the proposals for the mobility hub and progress towards appointing a contractor to deliver the new station building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Howard. Mark.
Yeah, this one's one of the ones where it's been a long, laborious process for many, many years. And it's part of the London Gateway opening and the London Gateway Resort to deliver some bus interchange in some way. The original designs were just unsatisfactory. The council procured site opposite to make sure we get a better bus interchange and actually deliver more of a exchange instead of having it on the council on the site and building into the river. The original delays were numerously about the PLA and about the river area there from 2018. Obviously, it's now the redesign caused the design change that we're not actually building inside the river now, which then obviously increases costs. And we've actually, council has bought land to facilitate the bus interchange opposite to make sure there's a better interchange, a better mobility interchange, better car parking facilities, and way of using the Stamford station as we move forward. So I think that it's good that we split it into two parts. Was a decision by the council, and I think that worked to give a better decision to actually delivers more for the bus interchange, more car parking spaces, more cycle spaces in the opposite side of the road than actually trying to squeeze it onto a small site in the middle of the river, which is just what we inherited from the last administration. So I'm hoping my colleagues will here would understand that, and I do see the concerns that it's not delivering the tangibles that it was originally put forward. But I think coming back in the next few months, we'll see we all really do still want to see that interchange, making sure we can actually get the bus laybys, making sure we can actually get the road working, and making sure we remove buses off that small road in Stamford. So I think it's just delivering the station, which the residents want as quick as possible, was the way to do, is split it into two projects. I know you would like to see the interchange, but the residents want to see a station back because there's no station at the moment. It's a water cabin.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on this? No. Okay, well, Mark, thank you for that. Can I suggest then that we have a set of recommendations. Shall we move straight to those? Well, again, it's quite a few here, so I'll read it out. So note the update on the project. Note that planning permission has been granted for phase 1 of the project. Agree the delay to delivery of the project to December 2023. So is that agreed? Okay. Agree that a further update report be brought to the board in November 2021 to update on the progress of the design developments for phase 2. Agreed? And finally, agree that an additional update report be brought to the board in February 2022, which gives a further update to confirm that the tender process for phase 1 of the project has been completed successfully, to provide an updated delivery programme and confirmation that a full funding package is in place to deliver the phase 1 works, confirm the design progress for phase 2, including the planning application progress, along with an outlined delivery programme, forecast costs, and confirmation that a full funding package is in place to deliver the phase 2 works, and confirm that the project scope and expected benefits remain in line with that set out in the original business case. Is that agreed? I think we're going to be busy next February on this one. Okay, right. Thank you all very much indeed. Let's move on then. And Howard, thank you for the report. We next move on. We remain in Thurrock. This is the A13 widening project update, item 9. Howard, I think, is going to leave, and then Colin Black from Thurrock will be joining us to report on this. So, Howard, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the delivery of the A13 widening project. The board has been regularly updated on a series of issues that have arisen during the delivery of the project, some of which have caused project costs to rise. Agreement has been reached with the construction contractor, which provides greater cost certainty, and an updated forecast project cost is set out within the confidential appendix. However, there remains a risk to total project cost due to the nature of the construction contract in place and due to a number of outstanding compensation events. Commercial discussions with the contractor will continue through to project completion in spring 2022, so as to manage the risk of increasing project costs. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Colin, if you would like to add anything else to that and to take questions. Thank you.
Before I do, and welcome, Colin. Just before I hand over to you, to remind colleagues that we've got the appendix with the confidential aspects of this. Clearly, when we discuss this, can we make sure that we're clear we're talking about the stuff that is in the open section of the report, not the confidential section? Otherwise, we'll have all sorts of problems. So just a reminder on that. Meanwhile, Colin, over to you. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. I don't have anything particularly to add to that very brief overview, only to say that the project is progressing well and to timescales. Obviously, the challenge for us is, given the nature of the commercial contract, is being able to disclose where we are in those contract negotiations at this stage. But we are confident that we are on track for completion of the project to time and within the budgeting envelope that we have explained in the confidential papers.
Colin, thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this? Bearing in mind, Mark.
I'll make a small comment. Just it's thank you for your confidence in the board over the last year or so with the negotiations with our contractor as we move forward. And I think it's been collaboratory the way it's worked over the last year to get us into this position where a little while ago it was a very awkward position. We all wanted to see the A13 finished on time. We think we move in at a quick pace. I don't know if anyone has gone down the A13 recently, but it seems to be, I know, at weekends, and it's moving on at a pace, and we're hoping to keep it on completion target, our original target set out.
Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and Mark. As you know, I think this board has supported this project all the way through. And on a personal note, I have to take my wife to get her hair done in Chelsea next weekend. Is it going to be diversions, or can I drive straight through?
Mark, I think you might be the man to answer this.
Sadly, there may be a diversion.
All of the information regarding partial and full closures, I think there's only a few remaining now, are listed on the website, and we do communicate those well in advance.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron, for as ever enriching our discussions. Right, any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, right, thank you then. In which case, actually, we've got a couple of very short, simple recommendations. We are simply asked to note the update on the delivery of the project and to note that a further update on project delivery will be provided at the November 2021 board meeting. Okay, so that's noted. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 10, the A28 Sturry Link Road project update. Helen, I think you're going to lead. It's possible that wearing my other hat, I may have something to say about this, but.
So this report provides an update on the A28 Sturry Link Road project. The project involves the delivery of a new link road between the A291 and A28 to the southwest of Sturry in Canterbury. The board were advised at the July meeting that planning permission for the link road remained outstanding, but the decision from Kent County Council Planning Committee was expected on the 2nd of September. SELEP has subsequently been advised that a decision was made to grant planning permission for the link road, and therefore it is recommended that the board agree option 1 as set out in the report. As the board have previously been advised, ongoing land acquisition also presents a risk to project delivery. A timeline for acquiring the required land is set out within the board report, and it is noted that this may not be achieved until January 2023 if a compulsory purchase order is required. Due to this ongoing deliverability risk, option 1 includes the recommendation that spend of the LGF allocation should remain on hold while work continues to mitigate this risk, with a further update to be provided to the board in November.
Thank you. As chairman, I ask if anybody has a comment, and as Kent County Council, I do. So firstly, clearly this is, again, colleagues will be aware, this is one that's been with us for a very long time. It was very good that it was nonetheless approved by the County Council's Planning Applications Committee, as you say, on the 2nd of September. So we are now in a much stronger position for it to move ahead. The one point which I would raise a query in relation to the recommendations is the section which states that whilst securing planning consent for the project would be a significant step forward, it is noted that the land acquisition risk remains. Therefore, it's recommended the LGF spend on the project remains on hold whilst work continues. Now, I think we were not able to undertake any of the work towards, for if necessary, a CPO prior to planning. Of course, this is very much part of the process, and I would suggest a fairly normal one. And in particular, the recommendation is that SELEP would hold the money until this is taken further forward. Well, the truth is, unless that money is released, KCC will not actually have the funds to acquire the land. Other projects have been able to progress, I think, on this in many ways where there are CPO issues. It's quite unusual now, indeed, for SELEP to be holding the funding specifically, given some of the other mechanisms we've been using. So wearing, as I say, my KCC hat, I would like to propose that we shift that, change that element of the recommendation. And in particular, really that we quite possibly simply delete the on hold element of it. I don't know whether that would be necessary to release the funding or whether we'd need further explicit wording to authorise that, is my short. So Helen, I think if I could ask you. Subject of course to board colleagues agreeing that.
Yes, just to clarify, we've included that because obviously from our perspective, there is still a risk to project delivery at this stage, as obviously without the land, you can't deliver the project. But I understand your issue. So I think we need to note that there is still a risk there. But I think there's potential for a change to the recommendation to allow the funding to be transferred to Kent County Council on condition that the land acquisition is completed by the end of March 2023.
I'd certainly be very content with that. So, well, do colleagues, any other colleagues have a view on this particular topic, both the generality and indeed the specific point I've raised?
if it needs proposing, I'm happy to do that. I mean, it makes sense to, you know, if you've now got planning and can get on with it and confident that you can achieve it, then why would we want to put it at risk now through not having the capital to do it?
Thank you. Mark.
I quite agree, and obviously I sympathise with if you need the money to actually move on. The allowances, we've had that in Grays. I think we were allowed to actually withdraw down the money before CPO and to actually acquire sites. So I can't see that. But and obviously there's a guarantee, I'm sure, from Kent that if it doesn't fulfil, they would be returning the cash. So we can understand that. So I think that's perfectly feasible.
I'm entirely content with that. So I should mention, actually, of course, formally, there were two options amongst the recommendations. So I probably slightly run ahead of myself on this, because option 2 related, however, to what would happen if the planning committee had refused the consent, which it did not. So I think we can agree that we can set aside option 2. Go with option 1, and if I could just, I'll read that out with Helen. I may rely on you, if I may, on the middle part of the recommendation as to how we word that. So option 1, as I say, if the planning consent was granted, as it was by KCC's planning committee on the 2nd of September, the board is asked to agree that the total of 5.9 million LGF allocation should be retained against the project. And we say we're retained. Does that in any sense prejudge the next item, or no, it doesn't? Good.
No, it just means it remains allocated to the project.
It remains allocated to the project. So is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Secondly, to agree that the the second one is, can I have some alternative wording on that, Helen, please?
Yes, agree that the remaining 4.656 million LGF allocated to the project should be transferred to Kent County Council on condition that the land acquisition is completed by the 31st of March 2023.
Okay, can I just clarify? I should know this, but I don't. What's the distinction between the 4.665 or whatever it is and the 5.9?
4.656 is the value that's the accountable body is still holding. The remainder has already been transferred to Kent County Council. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'll try to think. There you go. Try it twice. Okay, that sounds great. Is that agreed? Thank you, indeed. And note that a further update will be brought to the November board meeting, which will set out progress towards mitigating the remaining delivery risk and progress towards delivery of the project. I'm sure we're absolutely fine with that. Agreed? Agreed. Super. Thank you all very much. Sorry, I'd forgotten. Right, so the item 11 relates to the A26 Tunbridge Wells Junction and Cycle Improvements Package, and the LGF funding award for that. There are actually two options in relation to it. And I think, Helen, you're going to lead off on this.
Yes, thank you. So this report provides a further update on the proposed change of scope for the A26 Tunbridge Wells Cycle Improvements Project and seeks board agreement as to whether the project change should be implemented. The details of the change of scope are set out within the report. In July, the board agreed that an updated business case should be brought forward to demonstrate that the revised scope of the project offered high value for money. This business case has been provided and the project has been assessed by the independent technical evaluator as offering high value for money, but with a low certainty of this being achieved. As set out in the report, there are a number of significant outstanding risks, which predominantly stem from the early stage of project development. These risks include outstanding key approvals, including from Kent Highways, which have the potential to significantly delay project delivery, limited public consultation to date on the proposals, uncertainty regarding construction costs and affordability as the project is only at concept design stage, and uncertainty regarding the robustness of the expected benefits outlined in the revised business case due to the fact the design is still being developed. These risks contributed to the ITE's conclusion that they could only attribute a low level of certainty to the project achieving the high value for money demonstrated within the business case. In addition to these risks, it is also noted that the project cannot meet the conditions for LGF spend beyond September 2021, as previously agreed by the board. This is primarily due to the fact that construction contractor will not be in place by the end of September. However, it is also noted that it has only been possible to provide an indicative programme at this stage, and availability of funding sources to deliver the project is dependent upon a decision taken by the board today, as the works are to be fully funded through the LGF. It is considered that there are no clear grounds for the project to be treated as an exception to these conditions. For these reasons, it is recommended that the board choose option 1 as set out in the report. Under this option, the change of project scope is not implemented. The unspent £623,389 LGF funding allocated to the project is returned to the accountable body for reallocation to alternative projects through the pipeline, and the board are asked to consider whether there is compelling justification to not recover the funding already spent delivering earlier phases of the project. This justification is set out within the board report. If option 1 is agreed, the funding will be reallocated under agenda item 12, and it is recommended that it be awarded to the Kent and Medway Edge Hub, Mercury Rising, and Southend Airport Business Park projects, subject to the return of funding by Kent County Council. These projects are already in delivery and offer greater certainty with regard to accelerated benefits realisation. If the board are minded to vote against the recommendation set out within the report and agree option 2, there are a few points to consider. Firstly, section 151 officer sign-off from Kent County Council has not yet been received in respect of the revised business case, and therefore the wording of the recommendations would need to be amended to reflect this. Secondly, under this option, it is recommended that after further project development, an additional business case is developed and submitted for ITE review, as this will provide greater assurance regarding project deliverability, affordability, benefits realisation and value for money. Finally, if option 2 is agreed, as with Bexhill, clear grounds for the project to be treated as an exception to the conditions for LGF spend beyond September will need to be identified by the board.
Thank you very much, Helen. I think it's fair to say also SELEP has received, hasn't it, a letter from the leader of Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, which I think sets out broadly an acceptance of the logic of option 1. But did you want to say anything about that, Suzanne?
No, we have received a letter from the leader that as you say, they understand the situation as it stands, and that it is difficult to find a compelling reason to make an exception.
Yes, I mean, there are some other important issues related to Tunbridge Wells, which I hope we'll be able to come on to a little bit later. But on this one, I think there is acceptance of that. Just for the avoidance of doubt, Kent Highways clearly is not given approval and so on. It's partly because, as the rest of the report makes clear, there isn't really something at the moment in the state to be approved. So I would hate to leave the impression that Kent Highways has simply been sitting on this. It's the fact that, for reasons I think we all understand, this is all at a relatively early stage. And therefore, does any other colleague want to speak on this? Rodney?
Yes, thank you, Roger. If we agree recommendation, option 1, the recommended one, I did note that Helen said that the money would be reallocated into the pipeline, and then the top of the pipeline, as she said, and I am aware of this and very keen, is the Kent and Medway Edge Hub. Are we in a position to actually agree that recommendation rather than it having to be considered as part of the consideration of the pipeline? I hope we are, because of course I'm a great supporter of the Kent and Medway Edge Hub as well, and therefore I would welcome this, but I just want that clarification that we're not doing something that somebody's going to challenge, assuming that we agree option 1.
Stepping neatly for a second outside my chair's role, I entirely agree with you, particularly on the, but Helen, in terms of the mechanism, because clearly we've got this item, we've got further discussions on aspects of how funding is allocated later on. So there's clearly an in-principle decision in option 1 in relation to the 638,000 or so. But how does it, if you just set out, Helen, how that works more generally?
Okay, so under this agenda item, the decision is simply regarding whether the funding remains allocated to this project. The reallocation of that funding will be picked up under the next agenda item, and it is recommended that the funding is reallocated in accordance with the order of the pipeline. So it's recommended that so the Kent and Medway Edge Hub would be within the recommendations for that report.
Okay,
Good. So lots of incentive for us to get onto that item whilst we're still quorum. Mark.
Yeah. Can I ask how many? There's a compelling reason to leave the 1.8 million already spent on that. Maybe I have going back. I was trying to remember other occasions when we've reallocated and not taken back the full funds or the reasonable costs of it. It's just obviously going back to your point. It's 1.1 million we're leaving on a project that's not been delivered. It's an interesting. I understand the reasons in this item, but I just think is that moving forward in some of these high risk going on, there's got to become a reason in the costs, and I'm just concerned that there'll be less money coming back into reallocation of pipeline if we keep doing this.
It's a package of works. Yeah. And so all the other earlier packages have actually been delivered, and they've all been delivered in line with the SLA and everything. Yeah. So yeah, it actually falls down into a number of smaller projects underneath. So all of those other projects have been delivered.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? If not, then we move to, I'll take it first, that I'll take us through option 1, which is the recommended option. Clearly, if that is carried, then we don't have to worry about option 2, which was, but the details of option 2 were set out by what Helen reported. So option 1 is agree that the change of project scope should not be implemented as there are significant outstanding risks to both delivery and realization of benefits as set out in section 6 of this report, and due to the project not meeting all the conditions for spend beyond 30th of September 2021, as set out in section 7 of the report. So that the change should not be implemented. Is that agreed? Again, can I see people's hands? Okay, agreed. Secondly, agree that the £623,389 unspent LGF funding allocated to the project should be returned to the SELEP accountable body by Kent County Council within 4 weeks of this board meeting. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agree that the £623,389 unspent LGF funding should be reallocated to an alternative project or projects through the LGF project pipeline. And that's what we'll see, we'll come to in a moment. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. And agree that there is compelling justification for the SELEP accountable body to not recover the 1.177 million LGF spent on the project to date, provided that the spend continues to meet the requirements of the funding agreement which is in place. Is that agreed? Excellent, thank you. So I don't think we need to consider option 2. Option 1 is carried. Thank you all very much. Right, so we move on then to item 12, which is LGF additional funding awards. And Howard, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as a result of the decisions taken by the board today, just then, in relation to the A26 Tunbridge Wells Junction and Cycle Improvement Project, there is, and I'm going to say it again, £623,389 LGF available for reallocation to projects on the LGF prioritised project pipeline. This funding is currently held by Kent County Council, and therefore any award of funding under this item will not be confirmed until the funding has been returned to Essex County Council as the accountable body for SELEP. All of the projects on the pipeline are existing LGF projects which have submitted applications for additional LGF funding due to cost increases or the loss of local funding sources as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic or Brexit. These applications have been assessed by the independent technical evaluator, who has concluded that all the projects under consideration today continue to present high value for money with a high certainty of achieving this. Whilst this has no bearing on the decision being considered by the board at this time, it should be noted that the information on the A13 project regarding compliance with the SELEP assurance framework provided in the appendix is only partially correct. When the A13 widening project is considered in isolation, it delivers a benefit cost ratio of 1.7 to 1, which doesn't comply with the requirements of the assurance framework. However, when the impacts of the Lower Thames crossing are included within the value for money assessment, the benefit cost ratio increases to 2.5 to 1. Highways England are committed to delivering the Lower Thames crossing, and therefore it is considered that it is reasonable that these impacts are included in the assessment of the A13 project, meaning that the project does comply with the requirements of the assurance framework. It should be noted that none of the projects set out within the report will be able to spend any additional LGF funding awarded during this meeting before the end of September 2021, due to the timing of this decision, the need for funding to be returned by Kent County Council, and the legal documentation which will need to be completed. As a result, evidence is provided for board consideration of how the projects meet the conditions for LGF spend beyond September 2021. It is recommended that the £623,389 available is awarded to the Kent and Medway Edge Hub, Mercury Rising projects, whilst the remaining balance allocated to the Southend Airport Business Park project, Part A. I think at this point I hand back to the Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Howard. Any comments or questions on this? If not, then I think we need, so I'm just trying to find the appropriate recommendations, which would be clearly in line with what you just mentioned, Howard. I'm just trying to work my way down this because there are so many, there were so many possibilities as to, here we go. I think it's this one, isn't it? Yeah, agree the award. Yeah, agree the award of additional LGF to the following projects in the order they appear on the LGF. There must be a fine for this or someone. Agree the award of additional LGF to the following projects in the order they appear on the LGF COVID-19 Response Fund Prioritised Project Pipeline, subject to the LGF funding being returned to the SELEP accountable body for reallocation. And that would be Kent and Medway Edge Hub, 322,872, Mercury Rising in Essex, 228,000, and then the Southend Airport Business Park is Part A, is that as well? Yeah, 72,517. Is that agreed? Sorry, no. Are there?
Should we do that? We'll do that decision and then come back to the others. So,
yeah, apologies. Yeah, sorry. So can we agree that? Yeah, good. So otherwise, we were supposed to note that the award of additional LGF funding to the projects outlined in the report will only be considered if sufficient funding is available as a result of decisions taken during the course of the board meeting on 10th of September even 2021, which is what we've just done, and agree that the projects set out in Appendix E meet the conditions for LGF spend beyond 30th of September 2021, subject to strategic board endorsement in October 2021. So is that agreed? Agreed again. Good. Right. Thank you. I think we've covered item 12. Thank you very much indeed, Howard. Now, Helen, I think we now move on to the Getting Building Fund and the update on that capital programme. I'll have one or two things to throw into the pot there myself, but over to you for the present.
Okay, thank you. So this report provides the usual update on the Getting Building Fund programme and confirms the total GBF spend on project delivery during 2020-21, alongside spend forecast for the remainder of the programme. It is noted within the report that the Langdon Place project has not yet met all the conditions which were attached to the award of GBF funding in November 2020. It was expected that a Section 73 application for the installation of electric vehicle charging points would be approved by the July board meeting. The submission of this application has been delayed as a result of changes in building regulations and the introduction of the Fire Safety Bill, which has prompted redesign of some elements of the wider project. It is now intended that approval of the electric vehicle charging points will be sought through alternative means and will be secured in advance of the next board meeting. As it is expected that the required permission can be secured within a short time frame, it is recommended that the board choose option 1 as set out in the report, allowing the project more time to meet the conditions attached to the funding award. It should, however, be noted that due to the delays to the Section 73 application, a request to retain the GBF funding beyond March 2022 is expected to come forward to the board for consideration in November. The report identifies 3 projects which are considered to be high risk. 2 of these projects have indicated that they're no longer able to spend their full GBF allocation by the end of March 2022 and are considered in the next agenda item. The 3rd project is the Fast Track Business Solutions for the Hastings Manufacturing Sector project. This is considered to be high risk due to 2 factors. Firstly, third-party grant agreement between East Sussex County Council and Sea Change Sussex is not yet in place. As indicated under the capital programme, LGF capital programme update item, a decision from East Sussex County Council is now expected on the 30th of September. The second factor is that planning permission has not yet been granted for the project. A planning application was submitted in April, but a date for determination has not yet been set. There remains a risk, therefore, that planning permission will not be secured in time to allow the project to proceed during the duration of the GBF programme. As a result of these risks, and to ensure project delivery remains achievable within the GBF timeframe, it is recommended that planning permission be secured and the third-party grant agreement completed by the next board meeting. If this is not achieved, the project will be removed from the GBF programme and the funding reallocated to alternative projects through the pipeline. If these conditions are met, it is expected that approval will be sought in November for retention of GBF funding against the project beyond March 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. There's quite a few things within that. Any comments from colleagues on this? Keith?
Just to say there's a bit of a recurring problem here, and hopefully we can sort it out, and if we can't, then there's a very simple solution at the next meeting. Thank you.
Can I just bring in, and again, I take off my chairman's hat and put on my KCC leader's hat. There is one particular element which I'd certainly like to sort of put on the record at this point, which relates to projects that are in the pipeline. And in particular, you'll know that Kent Midway Economic Partnership, as one of the constituent elements, devolved bodies within SELEP, has always been extremely strongly supportive of the Amelia Scott project in Tunbridge Wells. And I've received a letter from the leader of Tunbridge Wells, which I would like to share with the board, if that's agreeable. So the leader, this is from Councillor Tom Dawlings, leader of the, and it reads as follows. The Amelia Scott is a large development in the centre of Royal Tunbridge Wells, which sees 2 Grade 2 listed buildings and a new build element deliver over 4,000 square metres of learning space and 600,000 square metres of commercial space to assist over 4,200 formal learners and create and safeguard over 100 permanent jobs. Once open, the space will grow the creative economy, promote learning and skills, and play a key role in the economic recovery of the town and borough. The project is widely supported by businesses and residents alike and is a core regeneration project for Tunbridge Wells and Kent County Council. Consequently, both KCC and TWBC have worked closely together to propel the project forward. Planning permission for the scheme was secured in 2019, and both councils have invested their own funds into the project to the tune of circa £13 million. To complete the funding envelope and secure all the desired benefits, a bid was submitted to SELEP last year to secure £1.4 million of getting building funding. This funding would pay for the fit out of the building, allowing it to open to the public in May 2022. You may recall the project is now second on SELEP's reserve GBF pipeline list, behind the Princess Alexandra Hospital project, which is seeking 0.5 million. Since last year, sufficient funding was secured to enable the construction works to commence, so the core building shell can be constructed. Work has started on site with Wilmot Dixon Interiors, who have been contracted to deliver the facility. So far, the project has created over 200 construction jobs and is due to complete before March 2022. However, the full benefits proposed for the Amelia cannot be delivered without securing the additional funding of 1.4 million to pay for the building's fit out. It had been hoped that the original intended benefits for the Amelia could be delivered through external funding from trusts and foundations, but these have been reduced due to the pandemic. Work is now drawing to a close on the main elements of base build, and subject to funding being secured for all elements of the fit out, the remainder of the project can proceed, but it is currently at risk as the remaining 1.4 million needs to be secured. Release of these time-critical GBF funds would ensure that the project can now be fully funded, the deliverables can be met, and the facility can open as planned in May 2022. Failure to deliver the project would put TWBC at risk of the terms and conditions of Arts Council England and National Heritage NLHF grant funding totaling £6 million, or around 6 million, which might have to be handed back. We would ask you to consider carefully the impact of your decision to extend other GBF projects which have yet to secure planning permission or started construction, and instead consider projects on the waiting list such as the Amelia. if there is the possibility, we would ask that we be granted the opportunity to bring the business case for Amelia to the Accountability Board's consideration in November, so that if the permissions for any other GBF projects are not in place at this time, the Amelia could be considered for a funding award. And that's from Councillor Tom Dawlings, leader of TWBC. I apologise for the length of that, but I think it was quite comprehensive, and I think set out what are the timing issues on that. So I don't think that has any implications for decisions we make today, because I think we have agreed to take forward the approach that we suggest on these various projects. It is simply a request to be able to bring forward, as I said, the business case to our November board, so that we can then consider it, and if funding is available, then we could make some decisions in a timely way, given all the timeline that Councillor Dawlings sets out in his letter. So, Suzanne.
Okay, so there's just a couple of points on that. The first is, you see later on in the agenda pack that we've had 50% of our funding has been withheld by government at the moment. So we're not really able to fund a ITE for a project that's coming forward at risk, but Tunbridge Wells could fund that themselves. The second is the timing to be able to come forward for November. I'm not sure what the deadline is for submission of business cases.
I think it's today, but depending on the nature of the project, it may be possible to do it through a one-gate review, which would allow submission in early October.
So we could explore that. And I think the third point to be clear is that this, whilst this board is able to agree investment in projects in the pipeline, it cannot agree reprioritisation of the pipeline. So if the Amelia Scott came forward and had its business case already gone through the ITE, but there was another project ahead of it, it could not leapfrog that process. That would be a decision of strategic board. So even if it was already to go, there's still another one ahead, and they cannot leap without strategic board. Authority could not go ahead before the Princess Alexandra.
No, I am aware of that, and it makes sense. Can I simply ask that we grant this, and subject to pursuing the option you mentioned, Helen? I think the aim is simply to give us all actually as much flexibility as we can have in this, given that we are, as always, dealing with sort of constantly moving parts. So, whether some of these projects fall by the wayside or not, we don't know. How much funding that gives us, what decisions we and strategic board then make. I think the aim is simply to keep this in scope, in line with its timing. That's all. So all I would ask is that, I don't know, do we need a formal decision, or whether that we would bring this?
No, I don't think that's the decision point for the board comes now, and the Secretariat will speak with Tunbridge Wells. We're happy to pursue it, but we do just want to make, we can only do that on the basis that they pay for that.
Some arrangement is made.
Money's very, very tight.
I know. Well, we'll be coming to that a little bit later in the agenda. So can I just ask that there's this sort of in principle, I don't think we need a formal vote, but just in principle acceptance that, subject to all the things we've talked about, we're able to bring that to the next meeting, or TWBC are, I guess. Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any other items to pick up, aspects to pick up on this item of the agenda? Because otherwise we've got quite a long list of, do we need to say anything more? Because we've got two options on the Langdon Place, haven't we? Do we need to say anything else on that? Okay. Then shall I read out, and clearly again, we've got a recommended option on Langdon Place, which I can read out first. And if we agree that, then that makes life simple. So, okay, right. So the board is asked to note the total spend on project delivery in 2020-21 of 13.614 million GBF as set out in Table 1. To note the current forecast spend for the GBF programme of 2021-22 financial year of 69.879 million as set out in Table 2. Note that planning consent has now been granted for the Jaywick Sands Market and Commercial Space project, which fulfills the conditions which were attached to the award of GBF funding to the project in November 2020. Then it's to agree a preferred course of action, the preferred course of action for the Langdon Place project. Option 1, which is the recommended one, is to agree to allow the project until the November board meeting on the 19th of November 2021 to secure the required planning approvals for the proposed electric vehicle charging points. Is that agreed? Thank you. Since the alternative was to remove it from the GBF programme, then that does not arise. We're then asked to note the update on the GBF projects which have been identified as high risk, and to agree that planning permission must be secured and the third-party grant agreement between East Sussex County Council and Sea Change Sussex even, in relation to the fast-track business solutions for the Hastings manufacturing sector project must be completed by 19th of November 2021. If planning consent has not been secured and the grant agreement is not completed by this date, the project will be removed from the GBF programme and the £3.5 million GBF funding will be released for reallocation to alternative projects on the GBF prioritised project pipeline. Is that agreed? Thank you. Good. Then I think we move on to item 14, which is again, Helen, I think to lead off, more matters to do with GBF, in this case, retention of funding beyond the 31st of March next year.
So as the board are aware, at the outset of the Getting Building Fund programme, central government were clear that the funding was designed to support shovel-ready projects, which could be substantially complete by the 31st of March 2022. As outlined at the last board meeting, some projects within the GBF programme have encountered unexpected complications or delays, which have impacted on their ability to fully spend the GBF funding within the required timeframe. Following consideration of both the funding and reputational risks, both for SELEP and local partners, associated with failure to meet the expectations of government, the board took the decision in July to allow GBF funding to be retained against projects beyond March 2022 in exceptional circumstances for a maximum period of 6 months, subject to the project meeting a variety of conditions and criteria. At this meeting, the board asked to consider 2 projects which are seeking approval for GBF retention beyond March. So as outlined at the last board meeting, the UTC Maritime and Sustainable Technology Hub project has experienced unexpected complications with regard to securing the lease for the building, which has delayed project delivery. The project is seeking retention of GBF funding beyond March for the maximum 6-month period. The project meets the criteria and conditions agreed by the board. However, there remains a risk regarding delivery within the extended time period as the lease issues are not yet fully resolved. As noted in the report, it is expected that the lease documentation will be agreed by the end of October. Assurances have been provided that if this timeline can be met, then the project is deliverable by the 30th September 2022. The second project that the board are asked to consider is the Riding Sunbeams project, which is seeking to build and connect the world's first megawatt scale renewable solar energy plant, which directly powers direct current railways. This innovative project is the first of its kind, and as a result, the full complexities of the connection with a network rail distribution system were unknown until detailed project work commenced. As a result, delivery of the project has been delayed, and a request has been submitted for retention of GBF funding beyond March for a further 3 months. Again, the project meets the criteria and conditions agreed by the board. However, there remains a risk to timely delivery as the project is subject to Network Rail's GRIP process. Whilst noting the risks attached to each project, it is recommended to the board that both projects are allowed to retain their GBF funding beyond March 2022. The identified risks will be monitored with regular updates provided to the board to ensure that the projects remain on programme. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that last point is absolutely the key one, which is for us to keep tight monitoring of what exactly is happening on these. Anyone wish to comment on these? Keith?
Just 2 quick comments. On the first one, I actually had a meeting, my regular meeting with the leader of Lewis District Council yesterday, and I think the progress on UTC is moving forward at quite a pace now. So that is quite comforting. Still a hurdle to go. And the second one, I still find it so exciting to be innovating in such a way in East Sussex that I think whilst wanting to have absolute assurance that we are on track, the extension would be something worthwhile, because if that actually takes off, it could be good across the piece.
Excuse me, can I just, Rodney, I know you need to go. Can I just, if does anyone else wish to comment on this item? Can we just take this decision? Because, and I'll read it out really, really quickly.
No.
We're not quorate once Rodney goes.
There is another item, but we'll find another way to.
Yeah. Okay. So let's gallop through this. I don't want to hold you up, Rodney. I appreciate it. The board is asked. Right. The board is asked to establish. Yeah, this is the start of the formal bit, isn't it? Yeah. Board is asked to establish SELEP's position on retaining building fund funding against the UTC Maritime and Sustainable Technology Hub project beyond the 31st of March 2022. Choosing one of the following options as detailed in section 6 of this report. The first option is the recommended one. Agree that the project meets the conditions and criteria previously agreed by the board for the retention of GBF funding beyond 31st of March 2022 for a maximum period of 6 months, subject to strategic board endorsement at the October 2021 meeting. Is that agreed? Thank you. I see that. So we can ignore option 2 on that. And similarly, the board is asked to establish SELEP's position on retaining Getting Building Fund funding against the Riding Sunbeams project beyond 31st of March 2022, choosing one of the following options as detailed in section 6 of the report. Again, option 1 is the recommended one, which is to agree that the project meets the conditions and criteria previously agreed by the board for the retention of GBF funding beyond 31st of March 2022 for a maximum of 6 months, subject to strategic board endorsement at the October 2021 meeting. Are we agreed on that? Agreed. Thank you. Rodney, yeah, you're free to go. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now no longer quorate. This means that we can continue to discuss items, but there are no decisions that we can take. I think, is that correct, Charlotte? Maybe you better just tell us exactly how things stand.
Yes, sorry, that's correct. So you can discuss items, but you cannot make any valid decisions now.
Should I suggest that we do go through and discuss? Then when we'll have to arrange another meeting. This committee cannot take decisions through written procedure or electronic procedure either, unfortunately. But if we discuss now, that might make the decisions go quicker at the next meeting. If people
It's just simply one item, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got one item with decisions, so we could leave the growing places item for there, and we could go, Lorna and I can go through the operational update and the financial situation at the moment because that doesn't require a decision. So
yes. Sorry, can I just clarify on one thing though, which is on item 15. Does that require us, because we've got our next meeting in November? Are we required to take it to all, because it's got to be a physical meeting?
Well, what we'll do is we'll go through and work out whether those are time critical decisions. So some of them,
yeah,
there are some that are not time critical that could be just added to the November meeting, but I just need to have a discussion about one of the decision points on there. But
okay,
we might be able to do something. Oh no, because the board meeting's virtual, isn't it? Okay, leave it with us and we will work out a way that's a sensible and pragmatic way forward. We won't call everybody together for one decision because obviously that
that would okay.
We will be in contact shortly on how we're going to deal with that also.
Okay, right, then thank you for that. So Suzanne, do we then move on then to item 16?
Yes,
which would make sense. So that's update on the operational activities within the Secretariat. And Suzanne, over to you.
That is me. Hold on 1 second while I just get to where I need to be. The main point of this item is to update board members on the risk register. There is some other information around our KPIs on governance, but at the moment they are all okay. The only issue that we have been having that we just would like to flag is that we have had some delays in receiving minutes and agendas from federated boards. So where members here are also members of federated boards, if you could use your influence on officers to provide that information to us in the agreed timeline, that would be wonderful. Moving on to the risks, we have a lot of risks at the moment. As I mentioned last time, the future of the LEP is very uncertain at the moment. And since we last met, I think the last time we met, I told you that we hadn't received our core funding. We'd been told that the core funding was contingent on getting our annual performance review, which we got the highest rate for our annual performance review. Since that point, we were sent a letter saying that we're only going to receive half of the core funding in year. So there's been a reduction of 50% of core funding in year. There is a potential for us to receive the other half of the funding. We don't know on what basis that would be made. So obviously now at the moment, we have to assume that we won't receive that. We don't know what the mechanism for releasing that is. There's been further delays to the LEP reviews tied now to the levelling up white paper. But whilst we've got an indication of when that will be published, there's no confirmed date of when that will be published. And as we know, when the white paper comes out, it's not going to have a detailed chapter on what this means for SELEP. It will be very high level. So knowing when we're actually going to know what the funding arrangements are for next year from April are now very, very uncertain. We have, as I'm sure board are aware, the staff of the Secretariat are employed by Essex County Council. They're our employing body. We need to set a balanced budget when we come back in November to Accountability Board, but it's very unlikely that I'm going to know any more about funding in future by that point. So we're going to have to assume that we've only got our reserves in place. And on that basis, we're going to have to make cuts to our staffing cost base. It's the only way we'll be able to balance our budget. And the timelines that need to happen, we have, there's 12-week notice that has to be given around redundancies and all of those sorts of things, which means we're starting a consultation piece with the Secretariat. Well, the first meeting to kick off that consultation for the 18th of October. A paper will come to Strategic Board to talk about prioritisations within the resources that we have available to us. But it's a fairly dire picture, really. Trying to mitigate it as best we can. Adam and I are working. We're working with the internal audit team at Essex to make sure that the risks are managed as best we can, that we've got sufficient reserves around severance costs, around close down costs, working with Lorna, and I'm sure Lorna will go through some of that in a bit more detail. But there is a very large and looming risk that means that we've got to take action now. That we'll be in a position that if there is information that comes out later in the year, effectively we're going to have to go through two processes. We'll have to go through a process now to reduce the team, and then a further process to shape the team to what the new LEP is, because there's just not enough information to shape the LEP. We don't know what new LEP looks like or whether there is a new LEP. So now it's really just a cost-cutting exercise to take us through to a balanced budget position. I mean, there are a number of other risks that we've got on there. One of the risks was actually about maintaining quorum at Accountability Board. So that has happened, but again, we tried to mitigate that where we could, unfortunately. That risk has now occurred, but that continues. General risks around our strategic influence at the moment. We know that partners are engaging with us less because of the uncertainty of the ongoing policy framework generally from government.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I think probably we'd all say actually utter sympathy for the management team, for the staff, for everybody going through this at the moment. And I do think that, whatever the merits of any particular structure, governments, and I think it's true, I'm nothing with making a statement about any particular government here, governments are just so often careless about the structures that are created and the people who work for them. And I think we all feel probably very strongly on that we appreciate the work that the team has put in and how we've all worked together. And I think it is a horrible position in which all the team in different ways find themselves. So I think that's something which I imagine as board members, accountability board members, we all feel very strongly. And we certainly wish to convey that to you, to Adam, to all those present, and indeed all those who are working within SELEP, and appreciate that there are going to be some, as you say, some very difficult conversations. So Keith,
But just to add to that, and absolutely agree with everything you said, I think the real tragedy is the uncertainty of it, because actually the white paper will come out in the autumn, and any of you, my officers are listening as well, officers have some quite broad definitions of autumn. It could be August, it could actually be December. And I'm not suggesting they're the problem here, it's absolutely not, but government will use that. And it is just this not knowing. I mean, it's almost an untenable position. I personally send all my thanks to all of the staff. How you manage to remain focused and want to come to work every day, which is, I think, something that the team here had generated over the years, and we have all benefited from that. It's now all put at risk, just as much of where we're going to end up, which is difficult enough, but it's just the uncertainty of not knowing that I think is, or not knowing the timescale is the real risk for me.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I echo your comments and Keith's. I just would like to see the whole financial picture, black and white. I also would like to see how long we've got in terms of that time span, and what we can do to maybe extend that to give us more time to discuss it and hopefully get the information from government. And then maybe I think the six of us with that financial stuff, maybe we can get together, talk it through, look at it, and to try to mitigate what clearly is a terrible situation to be in, and see what we can do as a group, because the staff have supported us over the years, and I think it's time that we try and support the staff. So if we can have sort of CVs and everything else, so we're ready, we're prepared, that whatever decisions we need to take or will have to take, we try to mitigate as much as that as possible from within our own systems, and that's it. But I really appreciate what the team has done over the years, and it's out of our control in a way, but it's a question of what we can do as a group of 6 individuals within our own organisations. Thanks.
Thank you. And sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I echo Keith's point about certainty needed, and the government over the last 18 months about devolved powers, what we're doing in how good government looks has been intimating this for 18 months. What the manifesto in 2019 said that there'd be changes, but obviously you expect something to happen and no certainty. It's now not knowing. SELEP. We will know that they want to recover what the LEPs look like. Central government, but it's just a shame. And I agree, Keith, autumn could well be December, because that's what we went to the local government statements come out in the back for last week of Christmas. It could well be an autumn statement. It could be what was next week, Leo, look like could well be winter, really. What I call winter with December, but it is local. The national government thinks that's still autumn. It's a shame, but I do think, yeah, it's disappointing, and maybe it's worth the leaders and that lobbying the central government to make sure that in that power team and I certainly will be mentioning that next week to the Secretary of State when he visits.
Very good. But it sounds like there are a couple of things then perhaps offline we need to take up to see what as individual institutions we can do. Okay, but I think otherwise, actually one question from me is in terms of securing through this process that individual, particularly the risks to, for instance, our being able to go on delivering some of the capital programs and projects that we've been describing. How can we best secure, how does SELEP best secure retention of the individuals to be able to manage that? Because clearly there's an issue for all concerned, but it particularly it has a sort of knock-on effect onto many of the things we've spent the last 2 hours discussing.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that's quite difficult to answer, unfortunately. I think when we bring forward priorities to strategic board, obviously the capital programme part is a key part that has to be at the top of the list, because there's contractual obligations, and the monitoring and evaluation of projects has to continue. There's a huge amounts of money invested out there through this board, and this board needs to continue to be supported, and those outcomes need to be monitored. So that's going to be high up of top of the list, to be quite frank, of those priorities. But how we actually manage to engage and keep our staff on board whilst through that very choppy change is a puzzle for us. I know Adam's there. I don't know if Adam wanted to come in on that point.
I agree. I was going to say, we can see Adam. Yeah. Adam's there, and I think we're very welcome to hear from you, Adam.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Susan, and really nice to talk to you. I'm very conscious that my voice is probably bellowing through the room in my experience of that room before. The way that Suzanne just summarised it is really on the money. You know, at the moment we're actually writing that paper for the strategic board in a few weeks' time, and there are things that rise straight to the top of the list in terms of things we need to resource. You know, the ongoing obligations around the capital programme certainly right at the top. You know, the support that we need to resource from the accountable body is also there. Beyond that, it's really looking at, you know, where we've made progress to date across our agenda. It's looking at the early things that came out of the LEP review in terms of the function and responsibilities of LEPs moving forward, taking a view across those, looking at where we've had the best impact, looking at where things are now going to be delivered by other partners, and then just picking out, really trying to support the board and giving the board a bit of a steer really on what are those things that we really need to focus our energies on, recognizing that, you know, we might well have a team that's, you know, 45% of what it currently is. So, you know, I think there are some decisions to be made. There's a you know, a fairly clear pecking order of things that we might want to do as an organisation. What I'll probably try and do in a few weeks is put it to the board on a matrix, really just list on a grid those areas of work that we could undertake, list those ones that we have to undertake, and really go from there. And take as Suzanne said, take the team through the process that we need to go through, and hope that at some point soon we get a positive message. Really, you know, trying to read the tea leaves. You know, you can pick up on something really positive one day, and then the next day it'll go completely the other direction. So, you know, it's a very difficult one to read. But, you know, we're grateful for your support, and we'll keep you close to all of it as it goes on.
Adam, thank you. And I think we appreciate, as you say, you have to do a particularly horrible form of Kremlinology to try and work out what is actually, what actually will be the full outcome. But thanks. Ron, I know we need probably to move on in a second.
Yeah, we do. I'm just going to say, Chair, that if we do decide we will get together, maybe the Chief Exec should be at that meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think, can I just suggest we move to item, so we need the recommendations, which is just noting the update on assurance framework compliance monitoring at Appendix A and government KPIs at Appendix B. And secondly, to note the changes to the risk register at Appendix C. So I think those are noted. We move on then to our final item, item 17, which is the finance update. Lord, sorry, no. Yes, moment of high anxiety there for a second. So, Lorna, over to you.
Sorry, I've been thinking I must remember the microphone. So sorry, I'll just start again. So this report sets out the latest position in terms of the forecast for 21-22 for the revenue budget. It's currently showing an adverse movement of 88,000 from our budget position, where we'd assumed that we would make a contribution to reserves of 78,000. We're now requiring a contribution from reserves of 10,000. The key reason for this movement is, as Suzanne set out, the fact that we are now have no confidence over the remaining £250,000 of government funding that we had anticipated. And so we've tried to manage that through the budget. And part of that mitigation is managing through the reserves, and part of it we're managing by reductions in other areas of the budget. Amy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, which sets this out. So working with Suzanne, we've tried to look to where we can find reductions in terms of the current year spend, so that we can try and protect the reserves as much as possible in the current year, so that they're available in next year to support as far as possible. But it's not been impossible to entirely mitigate that reduction to 250,000, because obviously, as board are aware, the budget for the operation SELEP is already extremely tight. Next slide, please, Amy. So this slide sets out the overall position in terms of what our operational reserves are going to look like by the end of the year. And we're now forecasting that balance will be 962,000 to take us into next financial year. The implications of that being that at the moment, given the fact we have no assurance of any additional funding at this stage from other sources, that will be the funding that will be available for next year, that will need to support not only any costs associated with delivering the existing operations of the LEP, the costs associated with the accountable body, but also assuring any costs associated with any close down or shutdown or potential redundancy costs associated with the LEP. So we're working really closely with Suzanne, Adam and the team to look at what the impact of that might mean for next financial year, with a view that for the November meeting, we'll come back with a budgeted draft budget position for review, taking those things into account. Suzanne, is there anything you want to say now in terms of the implications for your team for this year?
So we have, as Lorna said, we've tried to contain the under recovery of income as much as we can within this year's budget, because we know we have to rely on reserves for next year. We have some vacancies on the team. Those members who have been here before would know that Kate has left us recently. Helen is now our capital programme manager, and we haven't backfilled that post. Obviously, whilst we're going through a period of potentially entering into a consultation piece, we don't really want to be taking on additional members of staff. And it's also been incredibly difficult to find staff at the moment, which we're told by BCCHR, especially staff on fixed term contracts, all but impossible to do so at the moment. So that has allowed us to make some savings. We are using steer in a slightly different way to pick up some of that slack, because Helen cannot do everything. It's the work of 3 people, even with the best will in the world, it's just impossible. So we've trying to use the budget in different ways. We've taken out absolutely anything that we don't think is essential at all. You know, I've gone through line by line to look at what we've got in there, and we've pulled it right back. You know, we're still, whilst we've reopened now and people were looking to having meetings and things like that, again, we will continue to have virtual meetings wherever possible, just because it's cheaper and saves on expenses, train fares, everything is looked at forensically for this year. I think we've done as well as we can to find, you know, we found almost 200,000, a little bit over 200,000 of it through that ways to reduce the impact. But there will be a reduction on what the team can do. There is a reduction in people there. Whilst we have got a bit more capacity from steer, it isn't the same as 2 full posts. So yeah, we'll have to manage that. There's things like the reporting back to government isn't actually a contractual requirement. So that's actually now dropping down our list. As we have to prioritise on those things that we absolutely must do. And we're trying absolutely minimise the impact on this board and the strategic board.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Suzanne. Are there any comments or questions, Mark?
Yeah, very much like last year, and I would like your advice on it when the government held back some money during COVID, and there was the risk about project risks. I know it's a different matter, and they're holding back the running costs now for £250,000. There must be some, because they said they were waiting. Their last report was we were waiting for the appraisal of the board of the SELEP. There must be some officer conversations with them about the 250, saying, is there a reason for this, or is it that they presumed they've only guaranteed this $250,000 and we were incorrect last year in assuming that the 500,000 a year will be happening?
We were given verbal assurances last year when the annual performance review process was in place that the core funding would continue on the same basis as it had done in previous years, which is the £500,000, and it would be contingent on you getting the rating required under that. That was only written verbal assurances. There was nothing in place. We had no legal binding assurances. And we've spoken to officials. We're told that the decision came from Treasury, but that's a verbal. We've not been told officially. We've just been sent a letter to say only 50% would be paid now. The other 50% to be paid pending outcomes of LEP review.
Right, and that's a verbal letter outcomes of LEP review, not it's still waiting.
It doesn't say it says pending the outcomes of the review, but it doesn't say what the contingent event is to release the funding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
thank you. Yeah,
there could be any number of other conditions that sit within that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, then thank you both to you again. We are asked to note the updated forecast revenue outturn position for 2021-22 of a net overspend of 88,000. And to note the risks with respect to the future funding position for SELEP. But I think we've done that as noted. Okay, Lorna, again, thank you very much. And finally, so just to note, our next meeting, date of our next meeting will be Friday, 19th of November, venue to be confirmed. And finally, whether there's any urgent business, none's been notified to me, and none which I would consider requires its consideration in public. So I think on that basis, we can draw to a close. So thank you all very much.
And thank you very much to Councillor Goff for stepping in at very short notice, I think 8 o'clock last night. So thank you.